Okay, we are live once more, and I'm very pleased to say I'm here today with Mitra Azizirad from Microsoft. And today we are talking about how to put AI into action to solve some of today's biggest business problems. So welcome, Mitra.
Thank you. So happy to be here with you this morning, at least morning where I am.
I know, it's afternoon where I am. So artificial intelligence has been a major tech trend now for many years. And I think during this pandemic, it's just become more important for companies to innovate, to use the technologies they have available to really make a difference. So this is what we're discussing today. We'll talk about how companies can actually use AI, what makes it, what are some of the secrets of actually succeeding with AI. So you are the corporate vice president of AI and innovation marketing at Microsoft. Maybe you can tell me a little bit more about what this actually entails.
That's a great question, actually. And it's really twofold. The first thing is that my team focuses on thought leadership. Really, in the simplest terms, that's about envisioning, asking what if, doing inspirational storytelling, particularly around what we call at Microsoft Horizon 2 and Horizon 3 technologies, which are things that tend to be 2, 3, 4, 5 years out. We actually are unique in that regard, in that we're the only team at Microsoft 100% dedicated to that. And so our focus is to bring people along on that innovation journey. And whether it's customers and partners doing great things, or it's grantees working with our AI for Good program to tackle some of society's toughest challenges, we're focused on telling those stories and asking the what if. The second aspect of what we do is identifying and incubating new business opportunities, and I call it the candy store of Microsoft research. It's one of the best parts of our job, is we get to go in and comb through Microsoft research, look at things that we think would be really interesting and category creating, and bring those new businesses to life.
What an exciting place to work, though. This is lots of people's dream job, looking into the future, playing with futuristic technology and seeing how companies could potentially use it in the future.
Yeah.
So we're still in the middle of this pandemic. Where are you at the moment, Mitra?
I am in Woodinville, Washington, which is about 20 minutes from the Microsoft campus. And I've been here for the last 5 months. It has been in my the last 30 years, I would say, and I've had roles at Microsoft where I've traveled 85% of the time. This is the first time in 5 months I haven't traveled anywhere. So I'm right here in Woodinville, Washington.
Very good. Yeah, same for me. So we're obviously still in the middle of this pandemic. How have you been managing? How have you managed your team? What have been some of the implications and maybe some of the good and not so good parts of all of this?
Yeah, it's, speaking of travel, it was really interesting because we had just done a business trip, some members of my team and I, to Australia. When we got back is pretty much when things started going left, in terms of the pandemic, and Microsoft had put the work from home, mandatory work from home policy in place. And so coming back from Australia, no one knew we weren't going to be going back to the office. And it was quite, we had to pivot very quickly. We had some new people joining the team that we needed to make sure we onboarded, remotely. I was also very concerned about keeping up the culture of the team, which is, when you're that's always asking what if, and really sort of whiteboarding and strategizing with one another, keeping that culture intact was super important. So, right away, the first day we implemented what we call virtual hallway chats, just to come together 3 times a week, not to talk about business, but just what you would have talked about in the hallway had you been walking down the hallway and ran into one of your, coworkers. And so that was something that was important from a cultural perspective. And we have folks that have kids at home, but we also have folks who are living alone and can be isolated. And that was a connection point that allowed us to at least break into the day and have some fun conversations. The other aspect was we had Microsoft Build, one of our largest events coming up. And the company was sort of strategizing on whether we would do that digitally, how we would approach it, and had decided to go forward and do it virtually, to do it digitally. And my team were focused on doing the innovation snackable, sort of videos for it. And one of the hallmarks of our team is to do things in this sort of very innovative way. And we were struggling with how we could use AI, use technology to create a sort of virtual environment that would make it super interesting and not just look like I look right now, which is that you're speaking from home. So my team actually innovated around using this really cool AI program and Azure Connect cameras. And we found a way to create a green screen without actually having a green screen. And so we presented that at Build. We also made it available for customers and partners to use. So you can go out, it's one of our AI labs. You can go out to Microsoft.com WAC AI and download it and see it. And then I did my first very virtual keynote ever in my career using that green screen in a bedroom upstairs in my house. And if anyone has seen our AI Summit keynote, you can see what sort of background we chose for it. So times like this really allow us to innovate in different ways that we might not have thought of, or quicker than we had supposed that we would do. And we actually had our CEO actually used this example in a recent keynote he had as one of the really innovative ways that we as a company have used computer vision. And I was super proud that that came from my team, just in a way of, how do we actually tell our story better? And it turned into something much bigger than we even imagined.
Wow, that sounds fantastic. These live streams, we obviously are doing them for our audience here. So I was just scrolling through the screen here to see where people have come from. If people from all over the US, from New York, from Washington, from California, from Texas, from Florida. And then we have people all over the world, from India, from Serbia, from the United Arab Emirates, from Canada, from Dubai, Belgium, Nigeria. So it's from Ghana in Africa, from Atlanta, Bangladesh. So this is wonderful to see. Please keep sharing with us where you're from. So someone from Jordan here, from Finland, from Chicago. Also, if anyone has any questions, please put them in the comment functions. If you have any questions or comments, we have a team from Microsoft that will try to answer as many of those questions you might have. Mitra, you were just talking about looking into the future, experimenting with futuristic technology. When it comes to AI, for some companies, it still feels maybe as the technology of the future, or a nice to have. How do you see that?
It's interesting because I do think things have changed a little bit, or maybe more than a little bit, in the last 5 months. In all of our conversations with customers, and we do a lot of talking and brainstorming with customers, we had seen folks a little bit this sort of proof of concept chasm kind of thing, where people were testing AI in terms of the technology, doing labs and experiments. And one of the things that we have talked to folks about is how to actually not focus as much on the technology, but focus on the real world scenarios that you want to impact foremost. And then how can AI help you with that? Because of COVID, there has been a lot more willingness we have seen from our customers to really look now, not as sort of this futuristic thing that, hey, maybe we'll test and experiment with over the next 18 months, but what are some of those scenarios that we can deploy right now, that are meaningful? When we think about AI for sort of lasting impact, and we think about the applicability of it. So how would you apply AI to help and to help your business move forward? A lot of areas that we're seeing now, which may have taken them, 2 or 3 years from an earlier perspective. Now we see a lot of conversation around how do we innovate around contactless scenarios, autonomous systems. How are we able to move from sort of static rules-based systems that are automated for a particular task into really autonomous systems that can change, understand, and change with their environment. And so we've seen scenarios being discussed like sanitizing robots. We're working with customers around, you see, as a part of COVID, that food processing and quality has been really disrupted. And so we're working with several customers on how to use autonomous systems for that, or SCG that is using it to move their operational processes where they would do manual sort of optimization, and would take a process that would take months, that we've now helped them to take down to a week, which is super important. And this is because we've actually given access to this sort of early technological advances that we focused on here. One that I think is super exciting in terms of one of the scenarios we like to talk about is AI for everyone, and how you realize the full potential of AI when you put it in the hands of all of your employees. And when you think about the health domain, over the last few months alone, 50,000 research papers have been written around COVID. Think about medical professionals and everything that they need to sort of retain. And as they learn, doctors, they go through medical school and then have to continue learning. In the 1950s, medical knowledge doubled about every 50 years. In 2010, it was doubling every 3 years. And now it is said that it's doubling every 73 days. And so we have worked with Novartis in the health domain, sort of this link between life sciences and AI, really the most human aspect of it, to help them actually expand and extend their domain expertise over vast amounts of knowledge, to help accelerate focus on medicines and life-saving vaccines. So we're seeing a lot of very good usage of technologies. And when we say futuristic, some of these advances are things they're using that we have in preview mode, not products that we necessarily have released yet. So people are much more open to moving forward with technology around these scenarios on a much faster basis.
Very good. And have you got any specific examples of really innovative use cases of AI that stand out for you, that you find particularly interesting?
Well, there's a number of things. Well, one is when I think about even just sort of the screening and testing, PCL construction comes to mind, where they've created these citizen pods, that they call them, where they're using AI and Azure to power these retrofitted storage containers into environments where they can very efficiently do COVID testing. And I thought, that's a very innovative use of containers, and how you take something like that and apply technology to it, and make life easier, testing easier for people that desperately need it. Another area was with the United Health group, focusing on a return to work kind of protocol, using AI and other sort of components of cloud to also screen their employees, to make it safer for when they are returning back to work, to make it safer for them. And so there's lots of these kinds of business continuity and employee and citizen safety issues that are super innovative and coming out in almost no time, which is great to see.
Very good. I'm just looking through this stream. We're getting so many questions, and it's nice that your team is answering them really well. So that makes our job a lot easier. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to drop them in, and we will hopefully try to answer as many of them as we can. So Mitra, you're spending a lot of time with customers, with organizations that want to apply AI. Do you have any advice on the magical mix of what actually makes it successful? You must see organizations that have tried it and then it has fizzled out, and others have really taken to it and have embraced and have delivered some real business benefits. So what's the magic?
It's a great question. And, you know, as I said, we've traveled the globe multiple times talking with customers. And it's funny, you'd think you'd find very different kinds of issues, but you really find some things that are just the same across the board. And one is this extreme sort of focus on the technology and what the technology can do. And I would say the number one thing we've seen when AI hasn't succeeded in an environment is that it was actually sort of a cultural connect, right? Because we feel that sort of the marriage between cultural transformation and technology is really a force multiplier when it comes to AI. You need a comprehensive strategy, but you also need to include all different functions and departments across the organization. And we've been in a lot of discussions with customers where they say certain things won't work in their environment, and they assume that they're technology based, or at least they speak to them as if they're technology based. And actually they're cultural. Either people are not motivated to make the changes because they haven't been brought in and they haven't been a part of that comprehensive strategy, or quite frankly, the comprehensive strategy doesn't exist. But there's this aspect of inspiring and motivating people in an organization, which is a leadership it's the core leadership capabilities that's necessary to roll out AI. In fact, there was a recent AI Pulse survey that asked business leaders what was the number one thing they actually wanted to do, what was the most important thing for them in terms of adopting AI, and they said it was about motivating and inspiring their employees. There's departments, we've got lots of examples where IT departments don't turn on certain things that impact the ability to get access to data, and of course AI is nothing without the data. And lots of these issues where if you bring those people around the table to talk about it to begin with, you start out on a very different foot. So I think this development of a comprehensive strategy that's inclusive, all the way to the leadership behaviors and capabilities that instill an AI ready culture are the two most critical things that I see that usually are a little bit in short supply.
And I always find this interesting when we talk about AI, that actually some of the softer components are actually the key barriers. It's about culture, it's about leadership, it's about creating the right organizational culture, but also making sure people have the skills and people are trusted to put some of these innovations in place. So when you talk about culture and leadership, what are some of the things that I think companies can do differently? What can they put in place? And I guess you have got this in Microsoft because you have a culture that I think is innovative, that puts some of these things in place. What would you recommend other leaders do differently, and how other organizations could approach this?
Well, there's this component of investing in coaching and skills building appropriate, and not just from a technology perspective. Where we find the most interesting ideas often come from the people closest to the business functions. I'll give you an example at Microsoft. in our finance department. In fact, this is a story that we have shared with customers in where we've actually made mistakes and we've learned from them, is when you think about all the different parameters, hundreds and hundreds of parameters that go into creating a forecast at Microsoft around revenue. Pretty important thing for a CFO office, to do. They were implementing AI to help with that process. And at first it didn't go well because it was treated a little bit more like a data science project and a technology project, as opposed to bringing the people in who do the job closest to the function and making them a core part at all levels within our finance department for that rollout. It's where we come from saying, gosh, it's the cultural, this marriage of cultural applications along with technology adoption is this force multiplier, because it really helped us in that regard and was a true success story at Microsoft. But it started out in this very sort of shaky way. And we want to share those learnings. I would say the other thing that's very interesting to me, and very few people do this as a forethought. It very much comes in as an afterthought. And that's around ML ops, which is when you're thinking about a tool and the maturity life cycle of AI, you may have tens, hundreds, or even thousands of AI models in an organization. How do you manage to that? And then your point about trusted, how do you also develop AI in a way that every single step of the process is infused with responsible AI, appropriate connotations, all the way from design, development, training, deployment? You really need to have an ML ops environment and tool that allows you to do that from the get-go. And that's probably one of the number one things that I see as a tool to apply very early on that's not being used. And so we talk a lot about Azure ML ops with our customers. And I think, as you extend yourself and expend effort both on the culture and the technology jointly, you get that force multiplier. So those are the areas that we tend to speak with. I would say 9 times out of 10, that's new stuff for our customers to be thinking through.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And when I work with clients, I always say that actually sometimes it's worth thinking about almost the same level of investment in terms of time and finance and so on, in the technology and the cultural and the leadership and the skills and all of those soft components that we've talked about. Because if we don't get this right, we can have all the great technology in place, but it will not work.
Exactly. And very often it's the technology that sort of is at the forefront of why is it not working, and not sort of these attributes that surround it, that without it, the technology has no hope of working. And so we spend a lot of time talking about, and I say those sort of learnings are the things that customers want to delve into the deepest with us. Once they sort of understand, there's lots of aha moments. We have, workshops sometimes where we talk about these things. That's the area that we dive in the deepest.
Yeah, and I like this. This whole idea is that you partner with your customers as well and help them. And I guess part of this process is that you've created the AI business school to help companies learn more, explore some of those ideas. Maybe you can share a bit more about what this is and how people can use that.
Well, some of these learnings that I've shared, as we were going, crisscrossing the globe and finding these learnings, we thought, we need to find a way to share these. And so AI Business School is something that was homegrown from my team. And it seems like it's been around for a longer time, but we really launched it March of last year. So it's a little bit over a year that we have AI Business School, which is, we were the first cloud vendor to create this sort of free online masterclass series. And we did it in partnership with INSEAD to actually share these learnings. The story that I told about our CFO office, we actually have Amy Hood, our CFO, did a video for our AI Business School to share more of her experience in terms of rolling out AI, and we made it available as a part of AI Business School. And so we really came up with sort of 4 different modules around strategy, culture, responsible AI, and technology. And I say technology last because the first three modules are the ones that are actually the most popular. Technology is popular as well, but these other ones are super popular. And we now have in this short period of time over 1.5 million people have used it from over 194 countries. And so we used AI Business School as a way to bring all components together, and particularly for business users and business leaders to think through the implications and kind of drive through their transformation. So think about the kind of content we have on that. There's tools, there's case studies, there's videos and lectures, all kinds of things in order to actually put AI into action and make it real. And you can go out to Microsoft.com AI and access AI Business School again for free. And I encourage everybody to check it out. We track the NSAT on this, the satisfaction of people going through it, and it's really through the roof. It really will not be a waste of time for people to check it out if they haven't already done that.
No, I completely agree. I love it as a resource. I recommend it a lot. So anyone listening here, check it out, because there's nothing to lose and only things to gain. In terms of then looking at AI, you said you're looking at the next horizons. You have the envious position that you see what's coming ahead. So what are some of the things that get you excited? What do you see on the horizon in terms of technology, in terms of AI that you can't wait to see happen in the real world?
Ooh, that's my favorite question. And there's so many. But I would say one of the things that has me the most excited is because I love things where it requires you to just put yourself almost in another dimension. And I remember 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when I would talk about what I was really excited about then, which were these amazing breakthroughs from research in human parity around vision and speech and translation and language, all of these things. And those models and the technology that enabled us to do those kinds of breakthroughs had, millions of parameters, and you think about parameters in a model very much like within a brain, they're the synapses, it's where the magic, as you say, comes from. Now, in a very short period of time, and with the advances in deep learning, this new breed of how we approach AI, we now have massive models that are billions of parameters, and now moving into as you read about this, into tens and hundreds of billions of parameters. What that unlocks is the ability to move from AI models of today, which handle one task at a time, to these models that can do multitudes, I don't even know what number to say over time, multitudes of tasks. But the real magic in that, because it's not even important just how massive they are, it's this ability to have multiple domains. So think about having sort of medical domain and law domain, where you can mix those domains within a model, and also different modalities, audio and and video, being able to sort of crisscross those and match them. The kinds of applications that will come out as a result of that boggle my mind. There are things that are very hard to imagine for anybody today about that, but man, it's fun to do that imagining and ask the what if. And that's probably the area that I am the most excited about.
So do you have any specific examples of what you personally find really exciting, or maybe even where AI will influence and amplify other technologies? Because what I see is that AI is not just on its own. It has relationship with so many other technologies, from big data to the Internet of Things to extended realities. Is there any specific use cases you see in the horizon that you think that they are super exciting?
Well, for me personally, since you asked me personally on that, it has a lot to do with conservation of species. And this, I get super sort of also very personally energized. I love animals. Anybody who knows me knows I'm crazy about animals and do crazy things, like visiting wolves and things like that. I love the work that's coming through our AI for Earth grantees, where we, because I do think societal issues require even stronger innovative ideas and partnerships and access to technology and grants that help people really overcome the toughest challenges, and the ability to track and find more whale sharks in the last couple of years than we did in the last 100 years, because we take constellation mapping technology that came out of NASA to actually map stars and use it to now understand the spots on whale sharks, which are very much like fingerprints on human beings, and do these group sourcing activities where people can say, hey, I saw this, was on this like scuba diving thing, and I saw this whale shark here. Anybody recognize this? And then have scientists be able to come back and go, oh, that's so and so. We're tracking them. Or hey, no, that's a new whale shark. Or even in Australia, focusing with the Western Australian Museum on the dragons that are just inherent to Australia, and how to be able to count them, take a census on them without disturbing them, and understand more and more about how we impact the earth. Or tracking snow leopards, which is being done with AI in Uzbekistan and all these other different countries, where we've been working through AI for good to have positive impact on that. And that's where I'm probably where my heart is the most attached to AI.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think this whole idea of AI for good is so exciting, and I love the machine vision AI for spotting whale sharks, and I love the whole automation piece, that someone can simply snap a picture, put it up on Facebook, and it will automatically recognize that this is a shark that has maybe not been spotted, and then the robot will contact them automatically to then say, hey, where have you seen this, if the photo wasn't geotagged. This is all exciting stuff.
Yeah, and I think the more that we can inspire people with those stories and tell those stories, the more people not only go on that innovation journey, but it sparks ideas for them as well. It sparks that notion of what if. And I think really the core function of almost being on Earth is to constantly ask what if. And AI really allows us to have some tools to kind of bring to life the answers to the what if questions. And that's probably, and I would, I've been at Microsoft 28 years. In all of my years at Microsoft, this is the most exciting job I've ever had. And so that's saying something, because I've had some pretty exciting jobs at Microsoft, but these are the times that I just think we're lucky to be able to be in this field at this particular time.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'm just having a quick look through the questions. Lots of people are asking great questions, great comments, so please keep them going. Also, let us know what you think of today's session. If you have any ideas, any feedback, anything that you want to see in the future, let us know. We have a lot more coming up, so anyone who might want to explore this in a bit more detail, I've just recently written a blog post for LinkedIn based on some of the work that Mitra and her team have done, that you can follow up. You can obviously follow them on LinkedIn as well. And we've got some more exciting work coming up where we look at the AI or the link between humans and AI. Is there anything that you can reveal about this topic already, Mitra?
Well, one thing I'll share is that we are starting a new series actually on humans and AI. So I don't want to give away some of those stories that are upcoming, some really exciting stories actually. We'll be launching it next month. And so I want to keep that suspense high for people to check out our humans and AI. But we really do want to focus very deeply on the people who are asking these what if questions and coming up with amazing ideas and how they're moving forward. So look for that from us pretty soon.
Perfect. Very good. Thank you, Mitra, for your time today. That was really fascinating. If you have, I think there was one question I thought was quite interesting. Someone was asking about the ML ops side. And can you maybe go into a little bit more depth of what this is, what organizations should be thinking about? Because I think most companies understand the cultural side, even if this isn't maybe not on the radar when it comes to AI straight away. They understand some of the technology side. When it comes to ML ops, machine learning ops, what do you mean by that?
I mean a closed sort of loop process that starts from when you're designing AI, moving into the development of it, then into how are you trained. So these are all different steps in that loop. How are you training the models? How are you deploying them? And then most importantly, how do you continue to monitor those AI models? Because things that happen over time are that models degrade over time. Even if you're keeping your data as clean as possible, bias can creep in. As human beings, a bias is inherent within us. It's inherent within the data. Really having these monitoring skills that open up, along with other tools that we have, like bias detection tools and things like that, but used in an ML ops practice where you continually monitor the efficacy and and what these models are doing as they're deployed is super, super important, because that's how you actually use AI at scale. If you were ever only going to do one model in a company, which you never see, but if you were ever going to only do one model, maybe you don't need to worry about ML ops. But as you increase the models and it scales across the company, it's super important that also and I've brought up bias, but that responsible AI is brought into each step of that process, meaning it's actually infused into the design, into the development, into the training, some of the tools that I just talked about, into the deployment and the monitoring, so that you know that the decisions that are being made or driven through the AI models are what you expect and what you want. So it gives you that ability to monitor, to inspect how AI is being used in your organization. Critical to do that as a forethought, and not once everything's rolled out. And sometimes people aren't even sure how many models they have going on in their organization. It's a real issue that I recommend everybody check out ML ops. But that's a little bit more, maybe a clearer way to describe why it's so important.
Very good. That clarified the point very well. Thank you, Mitra. Thank you so much for your time today. That was fascinating. I could keep going with this now for hours, but I let you get away and get your cup of coffee and enjoy the rest of your day. And hopefully we will do this again at another point.
I look forward to it. And it's tea. It's tea for me. So I'll enjoy a cup of tea.
Very good. Yeah, I shall do the same now. Thank you very much. And everyone, thank you very much for joining in as always. Let me know any feedback, any questions, where you've joined from, and I will dive into the questions later on as well and have a look and try to answer any that haven't yet been answered. So have a lovely day. Thank you very much and speak to you soon.
Thank you.